All right, next what I want to do is we are about 1/3 of the way in our exploration of Tao Te Ching. 1/3. So this is all, 81. We've covered 28, but let's say 27 up until the previous meetup. So that's 1/3. So I think it's a good time to see where we are on this. So I'm going to ask an open-ended question to everybody. What are you getting from the study of Tao Te Ching? We're not trying to talk about what it is. We're asking, what are we getting? Because one of the magical things here is that everybody brings their own context to bear on this work. And this work is a work of philosophy, but it is also a work of art that is more suggestive, more, it connotes much more than it denotes. So I think to see everybody's perspectives of what, not only what they see, but what they are getting from it will be useful for us going forward. So I invite each of you to, anybody who wants, to talk about what they are getting from the study of Tao Te Ching. You can talk about what you've got. If you've been studying it for a long time, you can talk about your experience with Tao Te Ching itself. Otherwise, you can talk about your experience currently. So Jason, I'm going to have you go towards the end. I want to let everybody talk, and I want to put as many perspectives on the table as possible. Is that okay, Jason?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. But I just want to, okay, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, I just want to hear what everybody has to say. Don't ask me, even if you are free to pose questions, but we are not going to answer them. We're going to keep them as questions, okay? Because we want to just see what people are getting from this experience, okay? Here we are not, during this section, we're not trying to analyze, what exactly Tao Te Ching is. The question is, what are you getting from it, okay? So let's start with Evanique, Katie, Dave, and Charlie. Evanique.
Yeah, so what I'm getting from it is an appreciation for the earth as it is, for nature as it is, its perfections and its imperfections, and the imperfections that make it perfect. So what I get is that if I'm a part of nature and I connect in that way, I don't have to be perfect. I can just be who I am and learn about myself along the way and improve what I want to improve, and appreciate what and just appreciate how the connection between the Tao and going inside of yourself, and getting that if you go inside of yourself, you're the only person that you have to impress. So, that, and I get a sense of peacefulness, like when you go internal. So even when things are going crazy, different thoughts are going through your brain, and, being able to distinguish, well, what's true and what's not true, and what's popping in my head and what I really need to look at, and also being able to look at what is going on that's making me feel that anxiety. Like, what is it? Something outside, external? Is it something internal? Is it a trigger? Just being more introspective, I think, is the biggest thing that I'm getting out of Tao Te Ching, is being introspective and going inside and learning more about who I am and who I am in the world.
Wonderful. Now, I'm going to try to state what I got from what everybody is saying, just as a way of emphasizing it, re-emphasizing it. Now, I'm very limited. I'm going to try to do it very briefly. So I'm not going to do a very good job, but I'm going to do that so that it kind of crystallizes things a little bit, but always refer back to what people are originally saying. Summary is not, It's just putting a name on something that is real. The whatever people are saying is more real than what I'm saying. I got 3 points out of it. One is developing a deep appreciation of nature. Second is having the confidence to be who you are and going deep inside you. And third is the peace that you get when you do that. Next up is Katie.
I like how it captures the mysteriousness of how things are, that you can only, at the end of the day, experience it. When it seems like we're a curious group and we're always trying to learn and push the boundaries of what we're learning and learn about the brain and networks and the universe and all this. But at the end of the day, it's saying, you know, at the end of the day, put that all aside and just be in flow. And yeah, so that would be my.
Wonderful, thank you. What I'm hearing is kind of the openness to the grandeur of nature and the mystery of nature and our own limitedness in appreciating it. Thank you. Next up is Dave, Charlie, Judith, Brent, David, and Margarita. Dave.
Thanks, Shrikant. Couple things. First is the content, obviously. I was intrigued by the Eastern point of view, Eastern thought. So that's been very interesting to me, that this in many ways to me is very abstract, where in the Bible is Jacob Peterson talking about individuals. This is just completely abstract about nature, a river valley, a cock, a hen, or whatever. But it's interesting how things are tied together. I remember one of the early poems, I think there were 5 colors and 5 flavors and 5 coats or whatever. And this one, things are kind of linked together. The valley is linked with virtue, and virtue is linked with this and linked with, so it's very original how it's done. And that brings me to the second point, that I'm starting to understand and appreciate the poetry that's in there. And it makes me very sad that I'm 74 years old instead of 7.4. I might be tempted to learn 2,000 characters to understand this thing completely. Because to look at, as I've said in my book, it shows the characters. And as Jason was showing, I mean, there's 3 and 3 and 3 and 3. And in the English translation, it's each 3 characters are translated to a sentence or 2. And that, you know, there's not a direct correlation between a character and a word or a thought. In fact, I think as we're learning a little bit about these characters, sometimes the character's made up of 2 things mashed together, you know, like water and falling or something like that. I can't remember. But to me, and another recent poem, the lines actually rhyme. And to me, I'm starting to understand the subtlety, that I'm really starting to appreciate this great work. And I'm sad to say, I think next week I've got to start going to band rehearsals. But as I say, I'm going to try to get my book to Eamon. But it's been a fascinating journey. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. What I hear is kind of just appreciating this Eastern way of presenting deep thought, which is very different from the Western. It is poetic, it is metaphorical, it is pointing to these five colors, 5 flavors, the water flowing, and the richness of this new perspective or new way of approaching things. You know, you're appreciating. So thank you, Dave. Next up is Charlie, Judith, Brent, Laura, David, and Margarita. Charlie.
My perspective so far, and the main reason that I'm choosing to pursue this Tao Te Ching is that the way I see it is that there's kind of this difference between the West and the East. And the West is very extroverted and very masculine, so to speak, and very language oriented. And so its function, the way it's oriented is towards mastery of the world, okay, and domination of the world. And I spent way too much of my life attacking that, saying this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this, and instead of going and saying, well, really, why don't I just forget about all that and just focus on the presencing and being able to develop the hearing and presencing skill to be able to really be able to be within the black, within the feminine, and to be really more wholly present in my life. And I think it's a better way to live. And this constant, political battles and stuff like that gets to be really tiring and non-productive, really. Anyway.
Wonderful. Charlie, that was very deep. I mean, what I heard you say is that you have the West is yang, East is yin, West is extroverted, East is introverted. West uses language, East relies on feelings and intuitions. West is focused on mastering the world, whereas East focused on accepting. And you approach the West using the Western method of language, extroverted feeling, and trying to master the opposition. And what you found is that using the Eastern way of acceptance of what is, being more introverted, using the intuitions, may be a better way of countering than the West. Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Next up is Judith, Brent, Judith and Brent. Judith.
Okay, so the first word I wrote down when you said, what did we get? The first word that came out to me was peaceful, just like Evanique said. It always makes me feel peaceful when I read this. I feel like I get that overall in my life, I get from it that, to just be okay with the way things are, not to resist things too much, a little bit of just like roll with it. And also not to need to dissect everything, to trust my intuition, like you were saying, that I don't have to understand things always by dissecting them into words and pieces, that I can trust my understanding sometimes comes in a way that can't be broken down. So not to introspect too much. I also get balance from this and no extremes, very early on when I was reading this several months ago when we started, I remember I was taking a walk down a hill, and there was a stream of water just in the street going down. And, of course, it broke in parts, if there was a stone or something in the way. But it always went down with gravity, and then it would meander back. The pieces that split up would come back, and that image just has stayed with me throughout. It always comes back to me that there's just a flow to the world, our lives, and they just sort of have a path, and we have to be like water and kind of go with the path, and things will come and go, and but if we trust and allow, not resist too much, and just allow all the little pieces we have that we work with, our minds, our hearts, the whole of us, that we will find our way back to that path that we should be on. And then the present of just appreciating the present is something I've always enjoyed anyway, and I get that from this as well. So those are the pieces.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judith. The point that I'm walking away with from what you're saying is that the peace that you get is based on really the trust in being itself. So it's focused on being instead of knowing, instead of the temporary things that are happening. You're trusting the pattern of being itself. And once you're rooted in that, that gives you a sense of peace because it just is. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Next up is Brent, followed by David and Margarita. Brent.
When I think of the Tao, I think of some place inside me that's the deepest possible place that I can get to with my perception, and with knowing that even beyond that is more down deep inside. It's some kind of a well, the darkness within the darkness, and from that everything arises. And so it's the source of everything that we could ever come to know in our perception. And it brings a certain kind of deja vu feeling in me that where I recognize that somehow. And I'm able to recognize truth when I hear it. And the Tao is without question probably the most incredible spiritual document that I've ever run into. It's just got everything in it. And it just makes me feel totally helpless and without any desire whatsoever to be defensive or to fight or try to run away from it. And it makes me feel surrendered. It makes me feel like my feet are planted on the rich soil of truth. And the revelation of truth that comes out of the Tao, that's the most important thing that I've ever found in my life, is the revelation of truth. And everything else, like happiness and fulfillment, seem to come out of it when I find truth. So that's what I search for. And I find more truth in the Tao, I think, than anywhere else. And it's just, you're at the center, you're in the present moment, you're experiencing life itself in all its manifestations, and it's told to us that this is the way things should be, and this is the place we should be talking from and acting from and being from. And so it just brings everything together into one, puts me into the center, puts me in flat out into the present moment, and it's like I'm standing from a well of truth that's coming up constantly within me. And the more I'm open to it, the more I'm focused on it, the better I feel. The deeper it takes me underneath my egoic identities that are constantly getting into the way of spiritual truth. And so I can't even come up with words to describe the way it makes me feel. And it's just so nice to know that it exists and it's always there for some new way of looking at things.
Wonderful. That was beautiful, Brent. I mean, the verse that reminds me of what you're saying is the one that Ursula Le Guin calls returning to the root, because it's all about the root. It's saying, it's like there is that, and that is the source of everything. So it's kind of returning to the source. And once you do that, all the things that you're saying kind of happen at once. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and welcome. Next up is going to be Sophie, followed by David and Margarita. Sophie, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm late because I'm very new here and I didn't read out the chapters about Tao Te Ching. But I have questions.
No, questions we can do later on. What we are doing right now is that we're simply saying, what have you learned from Tao Te Ching?
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's what I learned, but I still, yeah, let me talk about it. I learned about how to find out the peaceful from the inner side, not from the outside. But however, I still think my, my self-confidence or something like happiness, I feel more happy from communication or conversation from the other, like gatherings or meet up with the others. If myself, during the COVID-19, I stayed at home and I totally feel stressful.
Thank you.
But, so sorry.
Yeah. So what we're doing is that we're kind of very narrowly focused right now. on, because, firstly, welcome to this, welcome to the meetup. What we're doing is that we've been going through about 27 of the meetups, and everybody is talking about what they got from the meetup. So welcome. Please enjoy all the things that people are saying, and then we can go ahead from there. Okay, thank you. Next up is David, Margarita, and Kevin. David.
That's your con. Yeah, talking about broadly, I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm getting from this. One is just the sort of comparative philosophy, and just seeing again the connection from the East and the West, and creation myths from that first chapter. The word. I mean, just all the connections and allusions to these different concepts, which I don't know how much they were bouncing around between the East and the West at that time, but it's very amazing. Also, from this meetup itself, I mean, just the amazing insights into China and the Chinese language, obviously from Amon, from Jason, from Kevin, from others, to understand more of the context of the geography and the positions of this, to understand, the setting for this incredible work. And also again from Jason's amazing work to better understand. I mean, as he, let me try to paraphrase him, the difference between translating the words of Lao Tzu himself versus all these other translators imposing their own interpretation or communicating their own understanding of it through their translation, as opposed to allowing the words themselves to speak. And so it's been really incredibly informative to get that more raw understanding of the materials, so that we in this amazing group can find our own insights into it, and try to just tease out the pieces that are from the original versus but also, I mean, hearing these great translations, all these different reflections that these other translators and what resonates in all the people here. And then also what I see is the putting myself again in the time, that this is that these poems, I mean, again, this great understanding of poetry, seems to be instructions to leaders of the time. And so it's really interesting to me to think about what was the purpose of Lao Tzu in the original creation of these documents. And if I were, in a court, if I were a leader, if I were a prince, I mean, if I were a future military leader, to understand, how this would be interpreted at that time by that person, and this interesting structure, as Jason pointed out, of the sort of philosophy and then instruction, sort of for most of these stanzas or chapters. And so it's really interesting to me to, I mean, on top of all this, emotional impact, there's great knowledge, just the knowledge for me, putting myself in all these different positions, all these different roles, and how different people would interpret the material in their context.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. So I'm getting so many things from what you're saying. One, you started talking about comparative philosophy. I think what this is doing is that this is giving us like a point to stand outside of the Western corpus. And that is giving us a perspective on the Western corpus. I'll say, everything that I've read actually does not do this. So I think that is important, and we are spending enough time on it to actually create a standing place from which we can look at our world. So I think that's very good. And I really appreciate, as you're saying, the work of Jason and Amon, and the insights from Kevin and Jean, who have lived with this for a long period of time, who know the language, and who are who've been so gracious and so generous in interpreting this for us, both giving us the meaning of the words themselves and how it is perceived. And the other point you're making is bringing back the historical context of what was this used for, how did this actually think. So just amazing, and absolutely I think the idea of this multiple perspective that we are getting is probably the culminating thing, because I always see that whenever how much ever work I do on this, using as many translations, when I come to the meetup, I'm completely blown away. Thank you, David. Next up is Amon. Amon, go ahead.
I couldn't pass up the opportunity to ride on David's coattails as he's talking about the East and the West. And I've been listening to everyone and been thinking, what is this doing for me? I've studied this text for a number of years, but an in-depth, deep reading and translation like I've been undergoing has given me more layers of appreciation. I think one of the things that the Tao Te Ching did effectively for the East versus the West was disabuse that culture from the obsessive quest for certainty, which is something that predominated within Western culture. And I think, tagging on to Brent, that is where some of that sense of deja vu comes from. When you read this, it feels so familiar because all of us are born into a world without certainty. We're born uncertain of our circumstances. And this text communicates that that is okay. You should accept that. And I think Judith pointed that out really well. I myself find myself wondering, was there an age where this was disseminated to someone? Was there a point where you could be too young to read the Tao Te Ching because you might get the wrong thing from it? There is a lot of encouragement, and I think especially within this Western corpus where we have this drive and this overwhelming need for certainty, from Plato all the way up to modern times. It encourages us and it gives us a permission slip to let go of that and go with the flow, be more in tune, in harmony with the world around us. But I do wonder from the East, and this is the paradox that always has confounded me, Taoists were some of the most busy, industrious individuals in Chinese history. They were known for doing just huge amounts of effort and work. And I thought back to that line, to reduce and to reduce again. I think we think of it as a push towards primitivism, an idea that you should let go of all your preconceived notions, let go of all your knowledge, return to a state of simplicity. But I do think that there was something in the Taoist ethos that said the first reduction would be reducing your ignorance. Study diligently, stick to those books, learn everything you can. And when you reduce again, step away from that textbook approach. Let it become a natural phenomena. And so I find myself sort of recalibrating this notion of goals versus expectations. And I don't think Taoists were adverse to goals. I think you actually see it coming through here a lot. These should be your goals. You should work towards these ends, but you shouldn't have the expectation that the world will conform to hand you your goals, that you can shape the world in your image, or that you will gain a certainty where you feel so sure-footed that the world's never going to throw you a curveball. That's really what I've been taking away from this ongoing process. And I'm going to have to leave shortly, but I want to thank everyone once again. I won't get to stay the whole night, but I will look forward to seeing you all soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. And it's always an honor. And I just learn so much from you every time you're here. So really, really appreciate that. What I'm hearing you say is, you started with toleration for uncertainty. I think the Western world, especially starting with Plato, is focused on consciousness. They're saying that whatever is in my consciousness, that's what it is, and I want it to be certain. And kind of pushing back against reality and ignoring reality and considering reality as an intrusion in this certainty that is there in consciousness. And what this does is that this reasserts the primacy of reality, primacy of nature. and acceptance of that as a starting point. Initially, it seems to be letting go of consciousness and going for reality. But actually, it is simply acceptance of reality, which frees your consciousness from its own kind of pride and love of its own products and making it accountable. So it is, in Western corpus, the most similar thing I have seen is Stoicism, which starts with acceptance of reality. But the purpose of acceptance of reality is to see the limits of what you can, what is within your power, and doing that. So it's kind of the acceptance is, I see, running throughout, acceptance. But thank you very much. You said it so much better than I did. Thank you, Amon. Next up is Margarita, Laura, and Kevin. Margarita.
Yes, I think there are two things that make me to keep returning to this session, Tao Te Ching. One is the text. Just like everybody said, I think revisiting the text every week, it gives me some kind of sanctuary to see myself in a kind of way. Because sometimes in this life, I'm a product of my community, my product of my own fear. And sometimes I'm not really nice to myself. So reading the text give me, it's okay to embrace both my good things and also the bad things I did. So it's a nicer way, the kind of way to revisit, just like Brent say, the well, the source of, to see yourself. But I think also the pretext, the second thing that makes me come here, I think it's a good niche, this culture of appreciation, learning from others. I learn a lot just by listening, not of course Trikan, Amon, Jason, but also everybody else, reading their text, sharing their knowledge. I think this is also a good way for us to share and to learn about ourselves in our pursuit of peacefulness. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Margarita. I really like the term sanctuary, because what happens is that it's like our lives get fragmented by kind of various concerns that we have. And in the process, while we are busy doing things, we lose touch. And it's lose touch with the core. And the sanctuary is your core. So it is kind of returning to the core. And absolutely, it's everybody who is here, who is doing this, whose perspectives keep adding different nuances, pointing out things that I have never seen. Each person, I'm really, it's like, I've been running many meetups, but what this meetup is actually doing is, I think of it as almost magical. Because firstly, we are looking at a text which is very deep, and it is very short. So you can focus on it. And great work of art is like a mirror. And in the mirror, you see yourself, you see things. And all these people are so kind, so generous in sharing what they are seeing in the mirror. And in the process of doing that, they're actually giving each other perspectives on themselves, which they could not themselves see. It's saying, hey, look there. Oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that. That keeps happening again and again and again. So thank you very much, Margaret. I really, really appreciate that. Next up is Laura, followed by Kevin and Jean. Laura.
Well, as I've said many times, I have lost a piece of life, and I've been in the throes of trying to recreate something. I shouldn't say recreate something, trying to create something. And I think it has been a battle up until now, because I've been in the wrong place. I was always sort of, trying to become normal. What does that mean? I was always trying, I don't have religion in my life. I have nothing, no other guidance. I have really been very stoic. I've depended on myself for everything. I can take care of it all. It'll be all right, and it was too much of a burden for me, actually, because I didn't know how to create myself. I mean, I had no roadmap to do that. And it's been a big struggle for me over these years, sort of trying to seek something out. And here came Tao. And boy, it just resonated with me. I found it. This is what's helping me make my being. And I can't begin to describe. I think there aren't words to tell how it's filling me up. And I don't know, because we are a vessel, and we can be empty or full. And I can be full of it too. But I was empty and been empty for a long time. But the Tao is really serving to fill me up and showing me the way. And I find myself being such a different person. I have a peace. I have a way of looking at things. I look at nature differently. I begin to describe things in my mind's eye in that way. I've always said I paint pictures of everything in my head, and I think I'm still painting in the same way, but it's a new appreciation when I get a certain painting, how it reflects upon what the Tao might say about my visions. And I just love it. Like, I didn't get verse 28 very much when I read it the first few times. And then I came here, and there were so many versions of it. My head was gutting off. But then it started to become clear after Jason did his, and then it worked. And that's how the Tao is for me. Again, I lack the words to describe the beauty and the fulfillment and the unbelievable wonder that this is for me in my world right now. I'm on this ride, for eternity now. I signed up for the Shirkant, train to wherever, anywhere he goes, I'll follow. But this in particular, I really like, and I hope you keep doing that. I don't know what we'll do when we get out of, when we don't have any more poems, but I'm sure we can go back to the beginning again and read them all, and we'll not have recognized any of it, because we will have all changed so much by the time we get back to poem 1. So I recommend that we do that, we just keep doing iterations of it over time. But anyway, I thank you for this wonderful ride. It's fantastic. It's great joy for me. And I thank you. And I thank everybody, because you all bring such wonderful insights of your own to it. I love this group that you've gotten together, and there's some of us who have been here longer than others. I mean, I think I am one of the earlier, members that came with the COVID. But in a way, I feel like I have these friends now, that we've been here together, and we're buddies now, and someday we may all meet, and that will really be a surprise. But maybe we should have Tao Teh Ching reunion meet. I don't know. Bye.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. I mean, that was a great testament to the life-giving power of Tao Te Ching. I mean, I've not heard a better testament than that. And don't worry, people have been reading this continuously for 2,500 years. So multiple readings of it by yourself, by others are, it's a lifetime, lifetime pursuit. So it's not going to get over. And there are other great works that are based on this. Zhuangzi is one, and which we'll probably get to. So we'll expand this further. So so there is a lot coming. So that's what I would say. I mean, it is really remarkable. I mean, you, as I've said, you know, you have enormous courage to kind of start from where you are and build up, and great ideas like this, and great people like this that are here, and great way of actually interacting, where on one hand, each of us is alone, because that depth is inside each of us, and it is all within each of us separately. And everybody here is respectful of that, of each person's own core, the root that is there in each of us. At the same time, there is so much benevolence of sharing what we know. And just by expressing, you know, speaking from your soul does magic for other people, and vice versa. So it is amazing. And thank you, Laura. Really appreciate that. Next up is Kevin, followed by Jean.
Yes, thank you. I would, you know, actually, David, you know, got passing about connect East and West culture. I guess other folks like too, same to me. From my bias, I understand Western culture, Eastern culture. Put a simple word like a Coke and the water. The Coke tastes good, but could be, you know, think about the water, much healthy. And also fast food and homemade food. We are all whole human beings. We can focus our difference only to 1% in DNA, at less 1%, 0.0, or, you know, we can focus our the same. We 99.9 in same DNA and 70% water in our body. So our nature, we born in nature by water. So flow with water it's by nature, it's no question. However, our practice, like sometimes we harm, like we practice, don't touch each other, don't talk to a stranger, especially. We assume the stranger is bad. So it's especially, you know, minor culture or other culture, we consider a self-centered, consider that bad. Next, I'm going to, let's see, for Tao Te Ching, I would say never forget first two sentences. Tao and Tao you named is not a eternal or absolute Tao. The name is, you can be named, it's not a eternal or absolute name. That's a logo and is, you know, ground that you can put there. For me, just now with certainty, Armand mentioned that. That's about our Western. Modern, I would say don't take negative. Let's our globally, we practice this. We everything is certain. We can defeat the hurricane. We can defeat nature, and we consider nature's bad. Give us like fire, give us flood, and we have specific solution. However, we also got another way. We need relax down, upgrade our knowledge, work with nature, work with others, and transform. And it's like computer, patch our system. We every day get better. In Chinese, one is called 天人合一, sky or heaven and I are one. By the way, I am going to emphasize Tao Te Ching is really human being asset. I thank you everyone else, you know, learning it. For me, inspired me, keep reading, you know, every time it's a different feeling, even to talk about the same thing. So we are lucky to learn this ancient wisdom. One thing I can share from Shakespeare, one is to be or not to be, that's a question. So he want to make choice to be or not to be. But here in Tao, in chapter 2, mention that being and not being interdependent in growth or in birth. It's interrelated. It's back to Swanka, you said being. If you think about it, we are actually not being. Tomorrow day is better today, could be. Another Chinese saying is, 朝闻道, 晚死去足矣. Basically, what's saying, learn the Tao in the morning, they're happy to die at night. That's about her originally saying that. And back to yesterday, we got topic self-reliance. So I'm going to put normally with self-reliance, we call it like self-served, self-focused, self-balanced. It's good. I find one thing shared here is we can find our own weakness, try to improve. Find other strengths, try help us. So the big question eventually is everything come to one. It's like this today. So all system is this whole system, not separate. Don't split them. So the question, how to identify your strength and weakness all together, not just pick one, discard another one. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin, I really appreciate your contributions to this series, and to meetups, my meetups as such, but this series in particular, because what you do is that you bring in a very different point of view of approaching problems, the Eastern view, and you put it very simply, just work with nature, work with others. Why are you afraid of other people? Why? What is there?
I can share with you, but one thing, I love talk to stranger people, no burden. It's nothing to lose. Talk to them. You're gonna love, give a hug. Yes. Hug, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And what happens is that, there is a big difference, big distance between the Chinese culture and, more importantly, kind of the Chinese sensibility. Basically, how do you process the world? Okay, it's like the psyche, the way in which the psyche operates. And, you've been very good at pointing these out. Many times the way in which the West formulates the problem is very different. And many times when you formulate the problem differently, the problem actually goes away because you're seeing the core of the issue. So thank you very much, Kevin. Really, really appreciate that. Next up is Jason. Jason, go ahead. What are you getting from this series?
Yeah, and then I think that Sharon Khan is right. Don't let me speak at the first. I listened to a lot, and I'm very happy and I'm very great because seems like I have a lot of people knows what I'm talking about. Okay, because I make a little bit different translation, just like I keep saying, I try not to put my own lesson in my translation. I try very hard. Okay, so my personal journal on this one on the Tao Te Ching is when I grew up in Taiwan, and then we have to read Confucius analog, but we never read any single paragraph, okay, of Tao Te Ching in school. And I doubt it because the school are so competitive. I doubted any of my friends really read this one on any chapter or not. So, but Among raised a very good question, like, is that the age so-called too young to read Tao Te Ching? I read at 16, so I don't know, it's too young and give me bad impact on that. So, but I would like to share, two things important in my lesson is I never been a very competitive person. Okay, you call it good or bad, I don't know. Okay? I never been a very competitive person. Secondly, I never pursue so-called the salmon bonum, the perfect, the highest good. I never believe the highest good. So whatever I'm doing, for example, a good example, doing the translation on Tao Te Ching, I work with Amang chapter by chapter. I always think about like, I want to do it perfect this way. But to a certain point, I would give up. I say, okay, that's good enough. Okay, let's go. Okay, so that become my personality. I never pursued the ultimate good. So it probably caused by the early reading on the, I always maintain in my work, in my study, I always maintain the second tier good student. Okay, I never been the first tier good student, but I think that's pretty good and made me comfortable because I can make a lot of friends, right? If you are number one, you've been viewed as an enemy from in a lot of competitive society. That's I learned so far, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Let me revisit what I thought I already know, and actually many things I don't know. And this time I look at in the people I become more westernized. So I look at it, the Western point of view, and I see a lot of things different. I try not to say good or bad, but I just try to reveal what do I say. Yeah. So, anyway, thank you very much. And I should see you next time. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Jason, I mean, it's just tremendous what you're doing. I mean, I really love the word by word translation. I really love especially you're discussing the various choices and comparing it to various translations. And what it does is that it's kind of opens up the language for us, gives us some flavor of the characters. What are the issues involved? So it's been amazing. It's been amazing. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
And it's very interesting how these things work in you. You absorb it at 16, and some of it actually remains with you. You may not actually remember like the details, but some really basic principle kind of seeps into you and kind of becomes a part of your soul, and you kind of act with it.
That's true, Rob. And that's a different different situation, because when I read this one, it kind of impact me, and I also read other things. So I don't know. You cannot say that's because this book, right? Because I also read the Zhuangzi. I also read Western philosophy. When I was young, I read Zarathustra. Okay, of course I don't understand, but I read it. I don't know is that by Zarathustra, by Nietzsche, or by Lao Tzu. I don't know. I just have to say this way. But that's the chance I because let me revisit, okay, in the Western point of view, and then I find out I get a different level of understanding. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
The other thing I want to say is that all your comments, with the thing that I really appreciate most is that you are respectful of both the Western tradition and the Eastern tradition. And you're not taking the Eastern tradition as given. You're not saying this is it and that's it. You are actually trying to get a perspective on it. You're trying to be, saying, okay, what does West have to offer? What does East have to offer? What does this do very well? Where does this fit in history? And you're doing all of that work. So which is exactly what we need to do in order to fully appreciate, what this is. So really, this is fantastic. Thank you very much, Jason. Always. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jean. Jean, go ahead.
I'm so glad we have this group studying Tao Te Ching dedicatedly. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join a lot of sessions because of the other busy schedule, but just the things I learned through this group, I found is extremely helpful. I think all the meetup I joined, I think the three things I think impact me most. One is Carl Jung, the other is Jordan Peterson, and the third one is Tao Te Ching. And I think Tao Te Ching is, help me understand the difference between the Eastern and Western philosophy. And especially, I think it's gave us that centeredness, certainty, the order and chaos, because our world is so much chaos right now. And people live in this uncertain world. And it's very easily to be distracted and distorted and worried all the time. But this Tao Te Ching actually gave you this certainty without religion. So that's what I really like, because I try to believe religion didn't work for me, but I look for that peacefulness. And I think Tao Te Ching can really give you to that, because he teach you about how you follow the nature and you have all the answer. It just gave you that sense of certainty and peacefulness. Then you actually can find the solution. It works very amazingly. So I think no wonder it's the second best-selling book in the world after Bible. Maybe it'll be the first very soon in the future. More people learn about it. So yeah, I want to share, I mentioned I joined the landmark training. And then this is kind of after that, I help you understand why the training works. And I was trying to join this fitness group. I was trying to get exercise. Then I ran into my other landmark friend, and they were like doing this 72 hard. I don't know if anybody heard of it. And I listened to it. I was like, oh my God, this is very stressful. I realized, the pump up way to achieving thing, I don't think is really sustainable. I think Tao Te Ching actually provide you a more sustainable way to achieve your goals, which is from inside out. And it takes time, like a form habit, and you understand the nature, the way. You don't have to rush. You can slowly achieve it steadily, which is more effective than you're like running around, bouncing around. And a lot of people we know actually get cancer or overworked because of that. I think have this balanced way to achieve with a clear goal. Tao Te Ching actually help us in this very busy world. I think is especially what we need today. Thank you.
Wonderful, Jean. I'm going to focus on two things that you said. One is the distinction between working outside in, kind of working on the outside and hope that something comes to you inside as a result of which is a typical Western way of doing things, versus working inside out, which is how the kind of the Chinese mind or the Indian mind works. The second thing is that it was interesting that you picked Tao Te Ching, Carl Jung, and Jordan Peterson as most interesting. And there is a clear connection between them. Carl Jung is very much impacted by Tao Te Ching, by kind of Taoist philosophy, Eastern thought, the idea of the self and consciousness. It's equivalent of, this yin and yang. And Jordan Peterson is all about order and chaos and finding the path, at the edge of order and chaos, with one foot in chaos and one foot in order, which is his way of trying to capture the same thing. He's a student of Carl Jung, and Carl Jung is a student of the Eastern. So it's the Western way of presenting the ideas in the Western terminology. So there is a line that runs through all three. So thank you very much. Next up is Brian, followed by Eve. Brian.
Okay, this will be a little bit briefer than some of the others. I've had a copy of the Tao Te Ching for a long time now. The copy that I keep mostly really is the translation by D.C. Lau. I find it is really a book of beautiful poetry. He has a very interesting way of using English and writing English. And the way I use the book, I've always used it as a meditation aid. I'll use it in contemplation. And I won't necessarily read the whole poem the way through. I will read the first phrase and contemplate that for a long time. I mean, 5, 10, 15 minutes before I move on to the next one. And I can take an hour to get through one of these poems just by doing that. And in doing all that, and all the years I was doing that, I never really, apart from the odd notes he puts at the bottom, I never really tried to understand it any deeper than that. What's happened now with this series is, I mean, I've got several copies now. I've also got the copy from Kimura, which I wouldn't say is beautiful poetry, but it does aid the understanding quite a lot. So what I'm finding in this series now, listening to other people's interpretation of it, is it's building my knowledge deeper, something which I haven't even tried with this particular book before, but trying to understand what people are saying, particularly people who know it deeply. It actually is a new book to me in several ways, because I'm now understanding things differently. Rather than treating it just as pure poetry, I now see the philosophy in it. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. And this is actually very interesting. You know, looking at this work as poetry and looking at this work as philosophy. And great works operate on both levels. They're very rare to find works which do this on both levels. When great art does that, great art kind of has an implicit philosophy, but this is actually very deep philosophy, but couched in poetry. So it speaks to you, even if you were to just let it just flow over you in a meditative way, as you're saying, of just reading poems whenever and getting whatever you can from it, it will have an impact. And you can also do this kind of, you know, philosophical work where you look through multiple translations, try to get at the meaning, formulate it in your own words, which I encourage everybody to do. And so thank you very much, Brian. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Eve, followed by Elena. Eve.
Yes. First of all, I want to say how much I admire all of you to be able to discuss this, because I only discovered this group last night. And I was just surprised that so much people will be interested in this, because this is such a difficult book, even for Chinese people. Like we never, like Jason never learned it in Taiwan. I'm in Shanghai, and we never learned it in primary school or something. But I have read it, but I have not really read it very carefully. I think that was one of the reasons that young people tend not to be attracted to the philosophy there. And interestingly, that again, Tan like mentioned Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung. Actually, that was the two that I admired a lot before I even came back to this Lao Tzu, the original thing that you were talking about. They had the similar thing, and I do think there's a connection of you being through everything and you get a bigger picture, because we came from Eastern world and we get to know the Western world. And I am female and I kind of have a little bit manly perspective, and including this paragraph, this is all about the big picture and the balance, and know the other side. Like Eastern understand Western, conservative understand liberal. Like how do you find the balance, find the road, which is Tao. Tao is about road. And how do you balance the known and unknown? And this is a very mature thing. And I kind of think that you have to get to that age to be able to understand the whole philosophy thing. So I probably am the newest member here, but I just want to say how much I admire you, like that you have come that far. But even this paragraph, the last sentence, there are so many discussions on that. Even Chinese people, they probably wouldn't agree on a lot of things. And I probably don't have time to discuss about that, but I'm just thinking this is really encouraging, like to me. And I just say how much I admire you that you have gone this far.
Thank you, Eve. Really appreciate that. I mean, I hear many things that you're saying. One is that, I mean, this group is special. I agree. I mean, it's just amazing. People from all kinds of different background with different levels of knowledge coming and looking at Tao Te Ching. And I want to emphasize for a moment the value of different perspectives. Because what happens is that, let's say you're growing up in China. This is, I find, I grew up in India. Most Indians do not have a perspective on Indian philosophy because they are, they take it for granted and they are kind of reacting to it. And what we're doing here is that there are people who grew up in China, there are people who grew up here, there are people who have been studying this for, Tao Te Ching for the past 40 years who are showing up. People who have translated it are showing up. The people who are just new to it who are showing up. So you have, different experiences, you have different perspectives, and the most importantly, we are actually sharing those things with each other. And that's what the power of this, way of approaching this work is. In addition to that, we have studied, for example, we have done about 50 meetups on Carl Jung, maybe 70 meetups on Jordan Peterson. And we are continuously connecting ideas across these various fields. And what that does is that it gives you a perspective on any particular thing that you are looking at. So the study of Carl Jung will enrich your study of Tao Te Ching. The study of the Tao Te Ching is going to enrich your study of Jordan Peterson, and so on. So that is also very real. The other point that you are making about, East and West and finding the way, achieving the balance between that. And you really need the maturity. You need to have enough experience to see the patterns slowly emerge so that you're not just focused on the figure, what is right there in front of you that you're focused on, but the ground. You need to have enough experience so that the ground is built in your unconscious, or your kind of, that serves as a background, a pattern of action over a long period of time as a ground across which you can evaluate these things. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that, Eve, and welcome. We are only 1/3 of the way through, so you have missed only 1/3. And we're just getting started. And I expect that the quality of what we are doing will keep on increasing as we go on. Next up is Elena.
Yes, and thank you. It's I just want to add to that. It's to me, it's not really a school, but it's some kind of a place or a space where you could go and bring everything and contribute as much as you want, or as least as you want. Could be whoever you want. Say it could be not speaking for the duration of the whole meeting, or if you want, you could talk a lot and just experience, say, the glory of high position and being totally not knowing what you are saying, and through collecting everyone's experiences and opinions and perspectives, so also just adds to my experience and experience of everyone here, and through that just allows to expand and build into the whatever is the fabric of the world we live in, because if it's it multiplies. So for instance, whatever is being said here in experience, through my experience and yours, is it's more than just me reading individual chapters and then going and trying to look up meanings and whatever else. It's just that it goes fast, and it just gives more. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elena. What I hear you saying is that basically people can come here with whatever level of knowledge, and regardless of the level of knowledge, and regardless of whether they want to speak or listen, I'm telling you that you get more if you speak, because the act of speaking, just formulating it, whatever your thoughts are, for somebody else, produces greater value for yourself. And you also get feedback. actually get to hear feedback from that. So it's like a feedback loop with this. And the people who have less knowledge, but if they're honest, sometimes they will ask a question that will make person who has spent 40 years studying the topic sit up and say, oh, I did not think of that, or I did not look at it that way. So there is tremendous value to be gained regardless of the level of knowledge. So I'm, I just love this. So let me quickly summarize what everybody has said so far. I'm just going to go in order. Kate talked about the mystery, appreciating the grandeur of nature compared to our limited consciousness. Dave talked about the poetry, the metaphors, the different style of Eastern thinking that we are learning something about. Charlie talked about the distinction between the East and the West, and the way of operating in the Western way, which is yang, extroverted, language-oriented, and focused on mastering nature, mastering everything. Whereas Eastern way is yin, introverted, intuitive, accepting. David talked about the comparative philosophy that we are learning from it. It is giving us not only the knowledge of Tao Te Ching, but also a perspective on the Western corpus that we are more familiar with. And tons of insights that we are learning from folks who grew up in that culture. Evanique talked about developing the appreciation of nature, being who you are, and peacefulness that results from it. Judith talked about the peacefulness which is based on trust in being. So you go back to the root, as Brent was saying, that it is the returning to the root, returning to the deepest core of you. That is what you can get from Tao Te Ching. Margarita talked of this as being a sanctuary. Amon talked about the obsessive quest for certainty in the West. And this approach of Tao Te Ching is talking about acceptance of reality and letting go of our pride and our desire to hold on to our ideas in spite of reality. So the acceptance of reality and starting with reality and moving with reality, as opposed to the primacy of consciousness. Eve talked about the difference between East and West and the balance that we need to achieve. Kevin talked about the importance of kind of accepting the nature, working with nature, working with others in a natural way. Brian talked about using this as a meditation or poetry. Jean talked about the distinction between the West going outside in versus this being inside out, and the parallels between Tao Te Ching, Carl Jung, and Jordan Peterson. Laura talked about, gave her testament on the life-giving power of Tao Te Ching. So it was quite a tour. Really, really amazing. I am just enormously grateful to everybody here who comes and shares their thoughts. And the richness of this conversation is just mind-boggling to me. So if anybody wants to make any comments about, just very brief, like 2 or 3 sentence comments, if they want to talk anything, last words before we end, go ahead and type !. Especially those who have not had a chance to speak. If you have anything to add, you're welcome to do that. at this time. I'm going to give about 10 seconds. Otherwise, Brent. Brent, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, I would just like to say you mentioned feedback loop. And there's a practice I do, which is talking out loud. The words come out of your mouth, they go back inside like this, and it sets up a feedback loop, literally where the subconscious mind produces the words, consciousness hears that and then starts commenting on it. And it's a perfect feedback loop. And when you're talking truth, when you're talking about the way you feel in the present moment, it leads you and your consciousness deeper and deeper and deeper inside. That's
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful point. Feedback loops are amazing. And in a way, this meetup is a feedback loop. People are saying things, other people are hearing them. Again, you know, they are hearing more. The same thing happens when you're writing. Same thing happens when you're speaking. And that is the way to really grasp something, correct something. So thank you very much. All right, folks, this was just amazing. I'm just completely blown away. Thank you so much. I'm just grateful to everybody who comes here to make this meetup so incredible. Thank you. Evanique, you were saying something.
No, I was just going to say good night.
All right, good night. Good night, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night. Thank you, Shrikant.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you going to post this someplace? Is that why you record it?
Yes, we put all of these on the YouTube. Brent, you've not been here before, so let me actually stop the recording.